So this year was my first year applying for and successfully drawing a Utah dedicated hunter deer tag for Unit 19C, which is also called the West Desert Tintic Unit. Hunt number was number 1557. It is a pretty large unit. Goes across Juab, Millard, Tooele, and Utah counties. All the way out towards Delta, over to Manti, Nephi area, kind of going up towards Provo, even the west side, Eagle Mountain and the Lake Mountains, and then out towards Eureka. Parts of it actually border the Vernon unit, so it's a pretty large area. I started off reading about this unit on utahwildlife.net, which has some helpful information on different units in the state, albeit you got to take a lot of it with a grain of salt. And essentially what I found on that website from the various posts put up by people was nothing good at all. One post said, "Sorry to tell you this, but 19C is not a very good unit to start out on. It's hard to hunt, and it has very, very low buck and deer numbers." Another guy mentions it not having any water at all. Several folks chimed in and warned several people who were asking about putting in for the unit that they were likely going to get bitten by rattlesnakes, because there's more rattlesnakes on this unit than anywhere else in Utah. Well, I have been hunting chukar in this unit in several different areas for a long time, and I've never seen a single rattlesnake, so I wasn't really worried about that. But we could substantiate, based on our trips up during the summer putting up cameras. We hunted the muzzleloader and the rifle deer hunts, since it's a dedicated hunter tag, that water is scarce, the hills are steep, the cover's sparse, and the buck to doe ratios were just incredibly off. I've never seen so many does, days and days of does, and not a single buck. It wasn't until well after the opening day of the rifle season, when the bucks started getting a little more ruddy, that we began seeing some bucks coming into the does, and hoping that it was just a matter of time before something walked in that we were willing to pull the trigger on. And so on a fairly warm afternoon, followed by a pretty steep plummet in temperatures, that's exactly what happened for us. So this was not a trophy buck by any stretch of the imagination, and that's not why I hunt. I do this for the meat and for the experience. So a 4-pointer like this, coming off of a unit that, in my opinion, was fairly difficult to hunt, I was pretty proud of what I ended up with. He came in below me just as the sun was going down, chasing a doe pretty hard. I'd worked up a load with this 270 shooting Nosler AccuBonds over 55 grains of 4831 SC Hodgety powder. Once I got myself adjusted prone on my pack and got him ranged, I think he was at 253 yards, and I managed, he gave me a decent enough shot, plug him right in the neck, and he dropped right down, didn't know what hit him. Kind of slid down. If you saw where I walked up to him at, he was laying sort of on the side of a canyon that was going down. I don't know, I think he slid down 30-40 yards, but it was lights out right there, and I ended up having about 40 minutes left to work on getting him opened up, quartered out, get everything hung, and pack out what I could until the next day. I was really interested in recovering that nozzler bullet. However, after it hit his neck, kind of interesting, it broke his neck, traveled down, and ended up exiting below his right lung in the dirt somewhere, and I just wasn't able to dig it out. But I was kind of interested in seeing the bullet retention after impact, especially at that distance, opening up in 253 yards. You know, not a lot of people are really into saving the hide and all that stuff these days. I did save the hide off this buck and made sort of an interesting little rug for my daughter down in her room. She kind of liked that. But yeah, my strategy here with the extreme variances in temperature during this time of year, and you know, obviously the limited amount of light I had left to get him cleaned up, I basically took off the back quarters, the front quarters, the back straps, took out the tenderloins, got some of the neck meat, put it all in some breathable game bags. I used some game bags that I got from Black Ovis. They're very similar to caribou bags. They're just 20 bucks cheaper and work just as fine. And so I took out the head and I think one of the game bags with a rear quarter that night in my pack. That's all I had. And then left the rest for the next morning to come back with the horses. Yeah, having horses to pack with in this kind of country is something I'm really grateful for. You can't, you know, the steepness of it and the terrain and the trails are trails at best. You still got to watch out for them. You can't be running them up the sides of mountains to get deer and get elk, and that's why, you know, I was glad to have shot that buck where I did at the top of the canyon, where I could just leave it and the meat at the bottom of that canyon to ride the horses in that next day. And there was definitely an elevation gain, but obviously I wasn't having to climb up to a peak to get the buck down off of. But you know, if you have horses, I feel like this is a pretty good unit to hunt because of the size of it. They're very useful, and also because of the canyons, it's not unrealistic in a lot of scenarios to be able to get the meat and everything down in the bottom where you can go pick it up, you know, later on with your horses. This sawbuck pack saddle you're looking at is actually a really, really old pack saddle that was found in an old barn down on where my father-in-law runs cows in southern Utah. And this is the first time I'd used it to actually pack anything out with. It's not the best looking saddle, and you'll notice there's a couple of kind of patchwork jobs and 550 cord done on the leather to hold things together. I don't know that I would have done this with a full-blown elk, but it worked fine for the deer. And it was pretty neat to be able to use something as old as this was to pack in and pack out with. Yeah, so at this point I figured I'd kind of shut up and just let you guys enjoy watching the scenery, I guess, as we go in to get the deer and get an idea for, you know, what the unit's like on the ground.